Okay, everyone, welcome. I'm Richard Herskowitz. I'm the Artistic and Executive Director of the Ashland Independent Film Festival, and I'm here with three award winners from recent Ashland Independent Film Festivals. Ruby Rich is here as the moderator for today's Q&A, and she was the winner of our Pride Award last year. Marcus Hu is here. He is the co-founder of Strand Releasing, which is the recipient of our Indie Institution Award this year. And they produced the 3030 Vision, 3 Decades of Strand Releasing film, which you just saw and which will be discussed. And Tom Kalin is here. Tom is the winner of our Pride Award this year. We're showing his film Swoon, and we're showing his short films in the festival. But he's here today because he is one of the filmmakers who you saw in the 3030 film you just saw. So I am going to turn my video off right now and turn things over to Ruby.
Thanks so much, Richard. Nice to be here with you both, Marcus and Tom. We all go back quite a ways, so we'll get a chance to talk about that. But Marcus, I want to start with Strand because I think by now you must be getting very expert at being celebrated. This has been going on since the fall, and I'm delighted because I was out of the country and missed the celebrations coast to coast when you officially marked the 30 years of Strand. Now, you evidently were a baby when you started this. You were maybe in your crib dreaming of movies and founded Strand. And I want to ask you about that before we start talking about 30 by 30 specifically. And I know that there's all of these myths and legends about how you and John Garens, your co-director, co-founder, started up Strand from when you were working at the Strand Theater, that you showed Macho Dancer, and the late, great Lino Broca told you that you should distribute it because you did so well. So you had this business acumen, this sense of what films could attract an audience back then. But what made you decide to actually become a distributor?
I would tell you that it was John and I were working at a company called Vestron Pictures, and we had worked on movies like Dirty Dancing and John Huston's The Dead, and that company had a great success, but then folded really quickly because they were just badly run. And so I went back home and started working with Mike Thomas at the Strand Theater here on Market Street. And so then at that point, you know, I was working there and John was working part-time at another company, and Mike Thomas was running Strand Theater. And the three of us just said, hey, why don't we start a distribution company after, you know, working on that booking of Macho Dancer that was so successful. And so Macho Dancer in 1989 was really our first movie that we did as a distributor. And we booked it at theaters across the country, and yeah, it did really well. And then the next thing you know, there was a local filmmaker, John Jost here, who had just done all the premieres in New York. I was friends with Greg Rocky, and he was then taking me to the Sundance Institute as part of a student project, which ended up becoming The Living End. So I did that with him, and we started having all these movies, access to all these kinds of movies, and a lot of independent LGBT films that weren't finding distribution elsewhere. You know, they were probably just a little out of the range of other distributors at that time, like Cinecom and other distributors. And so we formed a distribution company, and my mom loaned us a little money, and the Sundance Institute
famously.
I know. And the Sundance Institute famously also housed our company within the Institute for probably the first 8 years of starting.
Wow.
And that was just going to them, telling them what I wanted to do, which was to start a distribution company. And that was through this guy, Alberto Garcia, and John Cooper, and Michelle Satter. The three of them said, okay, sure. So they gave us a little corner space and allowed us to work out of the office there. So, you know, I'd work sometimes here at the Strand Theater, or I would work out of the Sundance Institute office, and that's how we started the company.
So I would say Strand was kind of charmed from the beginning then. Because that's a lot of stardust to start with, you know.
It had a lot of stardust and a lot of push from Greg Araki, because if it wasn't for Greg kind of, making all the introductions to all these things for me and opening doors, I doubt that I would have ever had the opportunities I had.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was through Greg in a way that I first met you, because that was back in 1992 when The Living End premiered at Sundance.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom, you were there with Swoon, and we did a panel together that Alberto, who you were just referencing, actually titled. He called it Barbed Wire Kisses. He thought that was like a great edgy title for what turned out to be the New Queer Cinema panel. And that's when we all met, I think.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, Derek Jarman was there.
That's right. Derek Jarman was celebrating his 50th birthday that week.
Yeah, and Marlon Riggs was there too.
What's that?
Marlon Riggs was there too.
He wasn't on the panel, but he was there. Sadie Benning was on the panel. She was 16.
Mm-hmm.
Or was she turning? Maybe she was almost 18. She was still underage. I know that.
She was a teenager, definitely. I remember how incredibly, Derek was so welcoming and incredibly amazing during that time. It's very moving to think that he was only 50 at that stage, because of course I was just probably I was 30 in 1992, and he seemed, substantially adult to me now. And I'm nearly a decade older than he was at that time. So it's really powerful to think about it. He was so gracious at Swoon during the screening of Swoon, because I had I had aped him. I had imitated him with all my period anachronisms. And so I was such a student of Derek that when he saw the film, he was gracious enough to congratulate me and not say, "You've copied me."
No, he was probably flattered. Come on. That was a great film. And amazingly, right now, as well as, in this moment of celebrating Strand, it's also the moment of celebrating Derek's Prospect Cottage, which has they've just raised the money to be able to preserve it with the help of Tilda Swinton and Isaac Julian, who was also on that panel and at Sundance that year with Young Soul Rebels. That moment kind of started off this interminable march of new queer cinema. And you, Marcus, with Strand, was part of that entire push into the theatrical realm and into the kind of art house mainstream. Mm-hmm. What was that moment like for you as a young entrepreneur and for the company, for Strand?
I have to say, the funny thing about it is that I got to meet people like Tom, like Todd Haynes, Greg Araki, Rose Trichet, Jenny Livingston, and I'm just naming, the few that I can remember from that exact period. And I just remember that at Christine and James and everyone, there was this weird family. We all kind of felt like family together, and we all shared ideas. We were traveling together, whether it was traveling all together from Rotterdam to Sundance to Cannes to Berlin. And we were this weird traveling family of people, and we always stayed in touch. And it's odd because, even at the 30th anniversary of Strand at MoMA, I just saw everyone in the room was basically the same people that I was friends with 30 years ago in that same room. And it's amazing that we've all stayed together as friends and stayed in touch and stay in contact. And if there was an emergency, I know that I could call Tom or Todd or Greg or Christine or Rose. Rose is crazy. I know that I count on all of them to come to my aid, and any of us could share that thing. Like, I need you right now. And we would still always be there for each other artistically and just as friends, whether it was, helping, with some kind of delivery, thing that we can't understand, or advice, or how to get around something. I think it wasn't so much about the business. It was about being a family unit.
Well, I think the fact that your mother was so involved in your launching Strand is a signal about this, Marcus, because I think you have a gift for putting family and friends and business all together. I don't think anyone would know how to separate them out. And I think that's been part of the joyous vision that you created around Strand. And it has really sustained everybody, the company, but also all of us.
Well, no different than,
thank you for that.
everyone remembers Wouter Berendrecht, who ran and many other companies like Strand. It's always these core people who run companies that, try to build families. And I think that that's the most important thing. And I think actually, if you had to break it down, I think Christine does exactly the same thing at Killer.
Yes.
And James and Ted certainly had the same thing with their set of filmmakers as well as their producing partners. It's about creating this kind of dynamic that just organically becomes a family that stays together and shares. And I think that's been really the most important part. That's another thing too. You look back, and that's been the really important thing about Sundance. I think Sundance has always kind of built that. I think that's where I learned it from too. It's just the way Sundance operates.
That's right. And of course, this is the year in which Cooper has stepped down.
Yeah.
And so there's been that kind of passing of the torch. I want to ask you, Marcus, you're talking about family, but you've also said that the idea for this 30 by 30 piece, this wonderful portmanteau film, came from a good friend, came from Raj Roy at MoMA. Could you talk about how this piece came about?
Well, we did our 10-year retrospective with MoMA, and that was just this huge, program, this 3-month program of our movies. And then the second one, it was the second decade one that they did. It was dedicated to, really important filmmakers that we've had large libraries with. I think it was Francois Ozon, Apichat Bong, Where Was Thekal, and Jacques Millot and Fatih Akin. And so this one came about when Raj and I were trying to figure out if he was going to do a 30-year one for the third decade, what the idea would be, because we were running out of ideas. And he said, why don't you go out to the filmmakers that you love and are friends with and create a project where you've asked them to create short films, and then we put it together. And it was going to be, just maybe 10 short films. But it ended up becoming this idea when I went to Apple about it. And they said, well, why don't you get people to start shooting them on iPhones? So that's a great idea. So we ended up reaching out to our filmmakers, and we ended up getting 35. And I kind of crammed them together. And, it was a really beautiful, it ended up becoming this really beautiful experience of, collecting these little, beautiful postcards and moments from friends and filmmakers and artists that we've worked with. And I have to say that the first film that caps off the series, of course, everyone has just seen, is Tom's beautiful, beautiful movie, which actually, when I saw it, it was the one that actually made me cry.
Oh.
There were two that made me cry, and it was Tom's and Catherine Breillat's. Those are the two of the short films that were in the package that really got me emotional.
And they're both wonderful. And do you want to say anything more about what made you cry, Marcus? This is view into the cinematic eye of Marcus Hugh.
Well, the thing about Tom's was I have to say, it has a beautiful score, but knowing Tom's vision and just the way he puts images together, and it just felt like a journey. It felt that short film of Tom's felt like someone on a journey for 30 years going, and I know Tom's journey. I know what Tom's been through in those 30 years. And in Catherine's, it was seeing just the kind of, where she is now in her life, and how she is as an artist and where she's at. And having been traveling with Catherine across the US, it was a very personal message she sent to me, and I really got it.
And you do that. You do travel around with your filmmakers, which is an amazing thing, Marcus. And Tom, I just had to ask you, I was just curious, that shot toward the end of your piece, is that the Catskills where the beautiful leaves are turning? Where are those gorgeous orange leaves and autumn foliage.
That's actually minutes from where I am recording this right now. I have a house up in a town. Me and my husband Craig have a house in Cornwallville, New York, which is about 3 hours north of New York City. And that's a road it's the road we live on, actually. It's a road called Sutton Road. And it's a family that we're neighbors of that have that great meadow.
Oh.
And yeah, the thing shot as we drive, that's the drive we drive when we're going to the dump to take our garbage. But it's one of the most gorgeous drives imaginable.
Well, it's just so hilarious to open with that, because I thought it might be where you are now. But considering where Strand started in this sort of seedy movie theater in downtown San Francisco, and where the new queer cinema started in kind of an East Village, nothing like the one that's there now, it was fun to see this evolution and to suddenly find ourselves in this, what looked really like this rural paradise.
Yeah.
Totally.
Very, very different time. Marcus, I have a question. You know, watching this, I thought, okay, that Strand is a distributor, you're a distributor, but suddenly you're a curator. And I wanted to ask you about that. Like, you curated these pieces, you chose these people, and who selected the order? How did you and John come up with this as a package? And was Raj involved at all? And I just wonder how this came about.
So we were really, we decided to just dump everything into the lap of Connor Jessup. This young.
You want to explain for people who Connor Jessup is?
Connor Jessup is an actor and director. He starred in a film that we did called Closet Monster. And I made an introduction with him to Criterion, and they commissioned him to do a documentary on Apichatpong. And they flew him over to spend a month with Apichatpong to film a documentary on how, everything about him, like what inspires him, how he comes up with these ideas for his movies and stories and his art. And so I dumped it in his lap. I introduced him to the people at Apple, and they kind of worked with him, and they gave him the equipment to put it all together. So he made all the creative decisions. He created all the little titles. He created the sequences. He came up with the rhythm, which I think works absolutely perfectly. I made no kind of creative input to him at all, other than just do it. And he did it, and he did a brilliant job.
And of course, his own piece is quite remarkable.
Yeah,
that's
his
in there.
Really beautiful. His piece feels like a Guy Madden. It feels like a Guy Madden kind of inspired work.
Yeah. And what were the pieces that most surprised you? That just kind of you didn't believe that's what they did for you?
Oh, well, now you've taken me by surprise in that question. I think every filmmaker delivered exactly what I would have expected them to deliver. They were all quite true to their vision. They all felt like their voice. I don't think there was one that really took me by surprise. Everyone seemed really faithful to who they were. Because
that was your instruction to them, right? You said,
instruction.
Please make it a film that embodies your spirit as a filmmaker. Is that right?
What I was really clear about with them is I did not want them to mention Strand, and I wanted them to make sure that it was about them as an artist. So that was the thing.
Tom, what about your idea of
questions to Tom right now?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, first I would just want to say that it's been an incredible pleasure to work with Marcus as a distributor, and all of those kind of family ways that are so resonant. And I have so many memories of, thinking of Berlin in the very early stage of Berlin, when the festival was still near the Kudamm, and staying in that crazy hotel that was like upstairs. The Arco that was up the stairs from the House of Prostitution, and just, I don't know, a kind of an era and a moment and a way of being in film. Or, going with Christine after the swoon screening. Derek had screened Edward II. He took us to Sanssouci, and Christine was in the midst of a very scandalous affair, and she had a necklace of hickeys. I mean, not one.
My God.
It looked like someone tried to throttle her with both hands.
Yes.
So, I have fond memories of friends of that time, and all these three people, of things that now we're dignified members of the film community seem very far away. And then also as an audience member, I'm a giant fan. Marcus distributed two of my very favorite films, Headless Woman and Stranger by the Lake, especially with
Wonderful
Stranger by the Lake,
films.
which is a masterpiece and is a film that, you know, should have been in every theater across America. And just the kind of vision that Marcus had and the kind of just incredible integrity of taste, and, you know, to be part of that tribe, to be part of the family, not just in the social way, but be part of that family where these incredible leaders of cinema from the, you know, international cinema, he's championed. That's been a real pleasure. And as an audience member, I thank Strand and all that you've done in terms of bringing these kind of movies to me as an audience member.
Thank you.
Of course.
That sounds like a wrap.
Yeah, totally.
So let's redo this. Reel it back. That would almost be a wrap, but you had something else to say, Tom.
Well, the fun thing of making the piece for Strand is that I knew for a long time, you know, unlike people who make short films and then go on to make a feature, I made features and never stopped making short films. So, you know, from the mid 80s to present day, I make at least 1 or 2 short films a year. And I often start them without knowing what I'm making. So I only had a parameter of shooting on an iPhone. At that time, I was directing the first episode of a series that FX is going to air soon, which is called Pride. It's a 6-part series that Christine Vachon and Refinery 29 have produced. And it's a series about LGBTQ civil rights in the US. And I directed the episode in the 1950s, which is the first episode. It's an amazing mix, an incredible diverse mix of directors doing the series. So for that show, I had to fly to Los Angeles. I also had to fly to Wyoming, where I did some interviews. And I don't know, that was how I decided to start the piece, is just to photograph every trip I went on, not knowing how I would use the footage at all. I photographed other things too. And then the one night in the Catskills, on a freezing cold night, I shot the snow lit up in my backyard under a spotlight. And that's how the piece started. So I just started with the snow footage and keyed it over the image, was interested in this idea of combining these two layers. Yeah, and to make a journey. I found it very moving that Marcus kind of understood in some way that it's a trip from coast to coast, but it's also meant to be a kind of bigger journey, a kind of a journey that's measured by the contours of your life. So it was beautiful. I was so honored to be first in the program, and I didn't know that you cried when I saw it. I'm so moved. And yeah, it also represents looking forward. I've been fortunate enough to be collaborating for the last decade or more with a young musician named Thomas Bartlett, who's about 20 years younger than me. He records under the name of Dove Man. And we've made dozens of work together, and that's been a really fantastic thing, understanding the value of collaborating with someone much younger than yourself and what the benefits of that are.
Well, it's a beautiful collaboration, certainly in this instance. It works gorgeously. And I'm interested in this keyed-in snow that you talk about. I don't know I know it's spring in Ashland, but I think they ought to consider keying in that snow over us here for the audience. Anyway, thank you both so much. Thank you, Richard, and wonderful to be back in Ashland. Congratulations.
I just want to tell you, I'm so honored to be getting this prize with you, and you are an inspiration. And whether I've worked with you on Swoon, or whether I've worked with you peripherally on Postcards from America, or Office Killer, you had your hand in Office Killer. And the short film that I love so much that we hid as an Easter egg in Swoon that no one knows.
The Mysterious Bean film, which is actually showing in the shorts program.
It is?
Very early. Yeah, I'm screening it in the shorts program.
Which
wonderful.
It's just your gorgeous tribute to last year at Marienbad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I wrap my arms around you and hug you.
I wrap my arms around you both.
Yes, and you too, Ruby.
Love you guys.
Love you.
Great to do this.
Congratulations, Tom.
So long, Ashland.
Congratulations,
Bye-bye.
Strand. Bye-bye.
See ya.